Agree? Each therapist has 3 choices in an hour of therapy. You could be a neutral professional self hiding behind a white coat, or pretend to be listening and caring, false self, or be a true self. You know, I was watching some of the therapy sessions when I was supervising. Sometimes you see the therapist wasn't even paying attention. The client pouring her hearts out, and the therapist look at the watch, look at the walls. What does that tell you? She's bored, or she's not interested. And would that be effective therapy? It's pretty sad, isn't it? So the genuineness of the therapy as a human being, having the ability to connect with another human, and it is a cornerstone of effective therapy. Okay, it's 11:30. All right, I'm going to finish this here. The founders of any theory of therapy, Freud, Jung, Viktor Frankl, they developed their approaches based on their own troubling experiences. So, as a psychotherapist, when negative things happen to you, those incidents, instead of destroying you, will become a bridge for learning. And after all that experiences that you have, you understand people who share your experiences. And you'll be more effective to help others, like Freud, Jung, and Frankl. Well, Viktor Frankl, you're going to hear a lot more about him in our humanistics and existential and meaning psychology. So each theory reflects the founder's own needs, issues, personal struggles, and their pathway to healing. And we may be attracted to a particular theoretical orientation because of our own personality and our own experience. All right. You see, we were talking about as we were interacting with our client, our personal characteristic is very important, and it makes an impact on our clients and also building our relationship. Okay, we will talk about managing the inner tension. We will always, there are things that are happening that really kind of get us pretty uptight and really tense, but we have to learn how to manage it between, like the real self and the professional self. And spontaneous self-disclosure must be used for therapeutic change in the client. I had a student coming back to me and said on site the supervisor had never supervised her. She did not say anything because she wanted the supervisor to sign off, right? Because she's on off-campus office agency. But she finally had to tell me because she said, I did not get any supervision. Because every time during supervision time, the supervisor used her as a counselor because she's got so much stuff. She was struggling with divorce and depression, and she kept on talking to my student. And she said, I didn't get any supervision. And I didn't want to tell the administration because she might get into trouble. And that is hard. Disclosure for your own needs. So finally I intervened, and she was able to move to another supervisor. So this is a very sensitive area, and we must be able to deal with our own issues. We need to have therapy or group therapy, and we need to deal with those. Total honesty. I think we're going to stop here at 11:30, and we're going to, I think enough, because this is going to be very, very sensitive. How much should we practice honesty? Do we have the right to be honest? Do we have the right not to be honest? What might be the outcome? What might, happen? And what are the dangers and what are the helpful situations? So we're going to do a little bit of that. Thank you. Let me see, I need to close this. Or you got to sharpen yourself as a good instrument. And there are so many areas that we talk about, that your attributes, your characteristics to facilitate this process of change. Change is difficult. From your own experience, it was so hard. Habits formed. It's hard to change. People with addiction, with poor self-concept, easily anxious, fearful. It's hard to change. The first step is they are willing to expose themselves. They are willing to come to you, trusting that you would understand their circumstances, trusting that you will be able to help them to understand where they are coming from. Being such an instrument, we really need to be honest with ourselves so that we could be efficient, but we would never be perfect. Remember that. Integration of personal self with the professional knowledge. And this is important. I know there are therapies. We just talk about feelings, we talk about emotion, talk about my own experience. Good, that's only part of it. You've got to have professional knowledge. You've got to be trained. You've got to be supervised. You've got to gain experience so that you know under what condition and under who you have, and whether you are ready for that type. There's a matching game, isn't it? Sometimes something came to you, you just felt completely helpless. You said, I don't know where to go with this. You talk to yourself. This is one of the powerful tools that I use. What do you say to yourself? Have you ever ask yourself? Have you ever asked your client? In this situation, what did you say to yourself? That's very revealing. I don't want to talk to anybody else. I don't want to talk to, share with anybody else. But what did I say to myself? And that's a true self, isn't it? And so there has to be, professional knowledge as well as knowledge of yourself, because there would be a good fit between what the client needs and what you can offer in terms of intervention. And sometimes we need self-disclosure. That's a big deal, isn't it? It's so easy to talk about your own story, right? At lunchtime, you tell people about your story. You say, yeah, I had the same experience what you just shared, right? It was so good. Because it heals, doesn't it? By sharing, and it helps other people to support each other and say, I'm not alone in this. And I'm not weird. This is good. How did you deal with that? This is how I deal with it. Well, I'm only partially there, And it's kind of healing process starts. So to be effective, we must accept if we don't, we cannot help our clients. Okay, what are the empirical evidence regarding effective and ineffective use of self in psychotherapy? This is so important. How do we train ourselves so that we could use ourselves as an effective tool? And in what way we might be ineffective. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. Agree? Relationship is a very powerful tool to share with your client. Without that trusting relationship, there will be just passing of knowledge from head to head. If you have a good relationship and the knowledge becomes three-dimensional because you're going to deal with my cognitive, my understanding of my problem, and my feelings about it, and then I set goals how to find some way in my behavior to change the things that I want to change. So it is deeper if you have a relationship. I just received a call yesterday, and someone said, I want to make an appointment with your husband. Could we have an appointment with him tomorrow? I said, I do, my husband cannot come to the phone right now. Could you tell me what that was about and whom are we talking about? Well, it's me and my son. We've got problems. I just wanted to come and talk with him. I said, well, unfortunately, he's not available this week. Then we could book you in the middle of May. And afterwards, and I think about it, they want quick fix, don't they? Something is broken. My cell phone doesn't work. I'll go and get a battery, right? And then something else, it's a quick fix. Most of the problem that we have in life require more than a quick fix. And therefore, you have to recognize that. All right. I guess it's pretty obvious that if your characteristics is negative, like what I mentioned, the person did not like people, but he wanted to do a Ph.D. in counseling psychology, obviously, it's going to be hard to train so that you can relate to people and to form alliance. But you could pretend. But how far can you go when you pretend? When something happened in your life, and you're no longer able to pretend, so you're not only not helping, but you could be harmful to your client. You might say something that you didn't intend, and you might give a wrong direction, and you might prescribe the wrong intervention. It could be, very disastrous. But if you are centered, and you go through, we are not saints. Are you a saint, Carol? No, we are not saints. So we do have ups and downs, but we have to be aware of when we are most effective, when we can, handle it. Of course, we do have an element of pretense sometimes, right? We have to be realistic who we are. We are not angels. We are not gods. So this is why the more we realize our own characteristics, and the less we could, pass on negative vibes and do harm to our client. Because whatever we say, whatever we do, impact other people's life, either positively or negatively. When two human beings face to face, it doesn't matter whether you say anything, just a look, you already. Sometimes when you look at somebody's eyes, the angry eyes, you want to walk away, right? And relationship builds, most people say, well, it's what you say. To me, nonverbal impact is much, much stronger, much influential than verbal impact. When you walk into the store, the salesman say, what do you want? That's a verbal impact. Well, I wouldn't want you to tell me. But somebody who didn't say anything, just smile, follow you around, and then look at you, then make some suggestions. Nonverbal influence, isn't it? I like this one. Therapists who were rigid, self-focused, critical, and detached were perceived as less understanding. Agree? Therapists who were tired, defensive, blaming, or not confident in their own competence were less likely to form good connection. Have you had anybody who exhibits that kind of characteristics? I'm sure we do, don't we? So if you want clients to come back to you, client to get something from you, and you've got to be aware of this. Defensiveness. We all have our defenses, don't we? We all have our weak points. Somehow when you talk about, like, you don't want people to know your age, that's very defensive, right? And you have reason for that because we have age discrimination in society. But you have to realize this. And you say, well, is that important to disclose? Or is that not important? So it depends on situations. So you have to be very wise. I sometimes wonder, who would want to be a psychotherapist if we require so much of ourselves? So you are very special people because you are willing to go out there to help people at your own discomfort sometimes. And that is commendable.